So good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of Meeting on the Mesa. It is me, Rita Johnson-Greene, again, as Chief Operating Officer of the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine. But in all seriousness, I am honored to be a part of today's patient spotlight. Victoria Gray is honestly one of my heroes. I mean, she is so authentic, and when she tells her story, you can feel her love for people. And so I'm really excited to, again, just be a part of this fireside chat with her. She's going to come up and share her story, and then we'll conclude with a brief fireside chat. And Victoria is a mother, she is a wife, she's a patient advocate, and she is the very first person or first patient to receive the CRISPR gene editing treatment for sickle cell disease in the world. And so without further ado, let me welcome Victoria Gray to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm here today to share my patient journey with you guys and my journey with CRISPR gene therapy. So I just ask that you give me a few minutes as I start from the beginning. So for me, at 3 months old, my mom had her first daughter, and she was just going through the routine bath time at night before bed, and I began to cry. She tried everything. She tried consoling me, tried feeding me, but nothing worked. So she thought she had injured my shoulder, which the doctors dislocated at birth. But when she gets me to the ER, she finds out that I have sickle cell disease. I'm having my first sickle cell crisis. And then they tell her that her first daughter, her baby girl, may only live to see 7 years old. So it was devastating for my mom, but only a prelude to what my life would look like. My first memory of having a sickle cell crisis is 4 years old. I was in pre-K. Spent the day at school, everything went well, but I was just ready to go home, play with my best friend, Candace. And as I entered my grandmother's house and I began to change out of my school stuff, the nice stuff, and put on things that I could go outside and play and get dirty in, I get this lightning type pain. It hits me at one arm, travels across my chest, down the other arm, and in minutes, in which really felt like seconds, my entire body was engulfed in pain. I fell to the floor, crying for my grandmother, anybody, to just help me. My grandmother rushed to get Tylenol 3s, which was my pain regimen at the time, hot towels, massages, she's praying, but nothing worked. That meant for me, I had to travel an hour away to the emergency room, receive pain medications, IV fluids, and a blood transfusion for over a week in the hospital. And even after that week, I would come home and all I could do was lay on the couch for another week to regain the strength to go back to school. And this would repeat in my life every 3 to 6 months as a kid, 6 months if I was lucky. I had a great pediatric team who would go into action even when they saw that my counts was getting low at routine appointment. They would try to prevent it, but still seemed like no matter what I did, I would still have these crises repeated. And for me going into school, middle school, I wanted nothing more than to be a cheerleader. I saw girls had the chance to join a cheerleading team, so I take this excitement to my hematologist. Like, I want to be a cheerleader. And she tells me, no, Victoria, you can't be a cheerleader because that exertion and exercise could send you into crisis and it won't be good for you. But like a kid, I took a licking and kept on ticking like the Timex commercial. I still was believing that I could still be normal, even though it was a lonely experience. My next thing was get into 8th grade. I had the height. I was taller than most of the boys. So everyone's like, oh, Victoria, you should play basketball. So I take this excitement and finally maybe I can be part of the team to my hematologist. And she says, no, Victoria, you can't. It's still exertion, and you get out there, something horrible could happen to you. Move forward, I'm in high school, still missing a lot of time out of school, but bouncing back because education was important to me. I wanted to be there to protect my grandmother. She couldn't read. She had made sacrifices for the family, so I wanted to be her brains and file all paperwork. So I kept up with my education as best as I could. I was determined. And I wanted to join the United States Navy. It was time for graduation, and right before basic training, my recruiter gets a call. Victoria doesn't qualify for the United States Navy. She has sickle cell disease, she needs daily medication, she can't come. I was devastated again. So I said, okay, I can still change the world. I want to be a doctor, specifically a cardiologist, because the lady who had been my mother, my grandmother, passed away when I was 14 due to a heart attack. So I wanted to heal hearts. I entered into college with the joy that, oh, I'm gonna be a doctor. Meet with my advisor. She hears that I have sickle cell disease, so she discourages me. Victoria, the curriculum is gonna be too much, late hours, and you know, stress can trigger your sickle cell disease and your crisis. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe I can be a nurse. I graduated high school and entered college in 2003. And because of the starts and stops and missing, because the fall, I would always get triggered, I didn't qualify for a nursing program until 2010. But while I was pursuing nursing in 2010, right before I can join the program, I was out on fall break, and I have a crisis 2 weeks before Halloween, well, the week before Halloween. This crisis would take away my ability completely to use my arms, to use my legs. I couldn't even lift my hips high enough to get on a bedpan. So that meant for me, being in the hospital for 3 months, in pain. I needed rehabilitation to learn how to walk, occupational therapy to learn how to use my hands to lift up a fork to feed myself. At that time, I gave up on every dream. I only wanted to go home, be a good wife. My husband, he had became my fiance in 2010, proposed to me in the hospital, and I had 3 kids at home. Twins at that time was 2, and my oldest son was 3 years old. So I just wanted to be a good wife, good mother. That was my next dream. But sickle cell would make that a challenge. I would often get taken away in the middle of the night, and I got a call from my daughter, and she said, "Mama, I was crying last night." And I was saying, "Jadasia, why were you crying?" She said, "Because I saw them take you away in the ambulance, and I didn't know if you was gonna come back." My husband, Earl, was in the United States Army National Guard, and he was getting deployed to Iraq. But guess where I was when it was time for him to leave? I was in a hospital in a medical-induced coma. He didn't know if I would be alive when he got back, and I was in a position to not know if my husband would return back to me from war. So it was a struggle. My health began to decline because of the care I received as an adult. It wasn't the same as the care that I received as a pediatric patient. Pediatric patient wait 5 minutes before my hematologist meet me at the hospital. Adult wait anywhere from 6 to 12 hours in the ER, barely moving, can hardly breathe, and I don't get to see my hematologist. I have to see the doctor that's on call, who thoughts about sickle cell, the majority of the doctors that I experienced were, we were all drug seekers, our pain wasn't real, and so dealing with that in my experiences with nurses that would trade out my medications for normal saline, and being in the hospital and experiencing a nurse when I called for my pain medicine, I thought she was someone I could trust. I knew her from the ER, and called for my pain medicine, and I wanted to sit up because I was trying to just get home in time for 4th of July. I had bought jumpers for my kids, and family was coming in. So I was like, can you help me out of the bed? And she helps me out of the bed, and it's time for pain medicine. And as soon as she gives me the medication, I get so dizzy, and she has to help me back in the bed. I just can't even sit up. I fall asleep for about 5 hours. I wake up and my pain it's just like day one. I thought I was progressing, but I just couldn't understand why I had been set back. So I called her in, and I was like, maybe the medicine's not working anymore. What does this mean for me? And she said, Victoria, it's actually been about 10.5 hours since you had something for pain. And I said, no, you gave me something about 5 hours ago. And she said, no. I gave you a huge dose of phenergan because I just wanted to see what that was going to do. That devastated me. Now I'm filled with fear. I make a complaint to the head of nursing, and she excuses it. She's like, I feel like she didn't do it maliciously, so we're just not going to let her treat you anymore. My next call was to my husband, who was deployed, and my mom. And I asked them to make me a promise. I said, if I die while I'm in the hospital, could you please get an autopsy? I said, because you may get a call that said I died from sickle cell complications, and that may not be the truth. I may very well lose my life at the hands of a medical provider, doctor, or nurse. I said, I won't need that body anymore. I won't have any more use to it. I'll finally have my peace. But I want you guys to know the truth about what's been going on. Toughest conversation I had to have, but that conversation also changed my prayer life. I said, God, if you love me, when I lay down at night, you won't allow me to wake up. I'm living my life every day, tortured by this disease, and the people that are put in place to help me, they're hurting me. So if you love me, you will allow today to be my last day. Found myself being angry every morning I woke up and the sun was out. But what changed? I had convinced myself in my mind, Earl would be okay. He'll find another wife. My children, they'll have a stepmom, or my mom will take care of them. They'll be okay. But it wasn't until I get this call from my son's teacher, and she says, Victoria, I need to meet with you in person. I go to the school, I leave my walker in the car. I didn't want to embarrass my kids. And she sat me down and she said, Jamarius has been acting out. They're thinking about expelling him from school. And I know why he's acting out. I was like, why is that? She looks me in my eye, she said, Jamarius is trying to get expelled because he's afraid that he'll be at school and his mom might die and he won't be there to save her. That was my reality. There I was begging, pleading for death, and my son was literally and physically fighting for me to live. So my prayer changed. I said, God, if you could just give me something, anything that would allow me to live long enough to see my 3 kids grow up so they can have their own family and have someone to support them, so my death won't affect them as much. So shortly after that, I read an article, everybody's sending it to me on Facebook, a young lady from Chicago. She had received a haplo bone marrow transplant and had found success. So I have a glimmer of hope. But less than 3 weeks after reading that article, I would find myself back in the hospital again. In some of the worst pain of my life, I have a ketamine pump in one arm, the Dilaudid pump in the other. Still no pain relief. I couldn't move. I was debilitated by pain. I called the head of hospital, the hospitalist in, the head of hematology, the nurses, and I asked them, is there anything, I read this article, anything you guys have that could change my life, because I'm not living, I'm suffering. They all looked at one another, looked back at me. They didn't have an answer for me. And I was at the major university in Mississippi. So I went back to my roots. The one thing my grandma taught me, and she also shared that with my mom, that God had the last say, and that I could ask God for what it was that I wanted. So I prayed for a miracle. In less than 30 days, I get a phone call from my hematologist, Dana Delasky. She said, Victoria, I have some great news for you. I'm like, what is it? And she's like, I won't share it until your next appointment. Next appointment was right after her birthday and my twins' birthday in January. And first time I'm excited about going to a doctor's appointment. And she shares with me that this doctor, Dr. Hadar Frangoul from Nashville, Tennessee, had reached out to see if she had any patients that would be willing to undergo bone marrow transplant. And she immediately thought of me. So I traveled to Nashville with my brother Timothy to meet Dr. Hadar Frangoul. My brother Timothy was going to be my best option for a match. We had the same mother and same father. Dr. Frangoul was a breath of fresh air. He was the doctor that I never knew I needed, because he listened to everything that I was dealing with in my health. And his words to me was, Victoria, I wish I could have met you at least 10 years ago. I could have been helping you. We move on with the testing. My brother is a match, but not 100%, so the risk of graft versus host disease is on the table. I was afraid of that, but went into prayer about, Lord, I don't want to experience that. I don't want to trade the devil I know, sickle cell disease, for the unknown and graft versus host. But I continue to go to Nashville for testing to move forward. But I have a crisis during one of my tests. It lands me in the hospital there. Dr. Frangoul goes into action immediately when he sees that I'm in pain. And while I'm there, 3 days later, he comes to my room and he asks me, Victoria, have you heard of CRISPR? And I said, no. He goes on to explain that it's like going into a textbook with thousands and thousands of words, finding that one word that's misspelled, correcting it without disrupting the story. So in theory, for me, what CRISPR could do, go in, edit my DNA, turn back on the switch so my body could create hemoglobin F, and hemoglobin F don't sickle, so it could possibly cut my crisis in half. So my question was, is there a chance of graft versus host disease? And when he said no, because they would be taking my cells out, doing the editing, giving them back, and because he said I would be the first, I wanted to know, if it failed, could I still move forward with bone marrow transplant? And he said yes, after a year, if nothing changed, I could move forward. So I knew then that's what God had sent me to Nashville for, was to participate in this trial. I move forward with the trial. I go in my infusion day, July 2nd, 2019, I get my super cells. 4 valves, Dr. Frangoul pushes real fast in my catheter that I had in my chest. After he's done, I just look at him and I said, that's it? And he said, that's it, girl. He gave me a high five. And when he leaves and the camera crew is gone, I start to cry. And my dad said, Vicky, what's wrong? I said, after 34 years of suffering, this is all it took? I said, nothing has changed yet, but I believe that my life is going to change today. So after 30 days of isolation and another month and a half in Nashville, I traveled back home to Mississippi. I began to taper off of the medications that I was on, 100 microgram fentanyl, 4 milligrams of Dilaudid every 4 hours, 10 milligrams of Percocet in between. And I just wanted to know what my life would be like without all those medications. Taper off, go through withdrawal because I couldn't get the dose down because COVID had shut the world down. But I go to bed one night and I wake up the next morning, the room is extra bright, it's quiet, and I don't feel anything. I say, oh my God, I'm dead. I sat on the side of the bed. I began to panic. I'm pinching my face, not small, but huge, pinching my thighs. And I'm like, I can feel that, but I must be like Casper. I don't want to leave these kids. So I call my kids in the room and they rush in. I'm like, Mama, what's wrong? I was like, nothing, just want to feel you, give you a hug. And I send them out. And that's when I had my moment like, oh my God, this thing worked. This is what normal feel like. It was the first time in my life that I ever woke up in over 20 years without the lower back pain and the pain in my hips that plagued me every day, no matter what. I used to shallow breathe because deep breathing made the pain in my chest worse. So my breath was going down and out without restriction. I felt nothing. And it's a relief that I thought I would only see in death. That's why I panicked. So it was a terrifying but joyous day combined. And I began to test my limits. I went outside, ran in the yard with my boys. I failed because I had no athletic experience. But it didn't end with me going into the hospital for a month, having to be rushed off. I took my first flight in life to visit my husband, who was deployed in DC, to be by his side. For years during his deployment, I could never travel. All the other wives were flying. And he would say, it's okay, but I felt like I was failing as a wife. So I got to show up for him. I got the opportunity to get my daughter dressed and watch her dance in the cold and Christmas parades. But I have to say the most fulfilling is December of last year. I got to be by my daughter's side as she gave birth to my first granddaughter. And because she had to have an emergency C-section, I was the first person to hold and welcome my granddaughter into the world. It was a dream that I only prayed for God to allow me to see, to be there for my kids in their moments of joy, their moments of fear, to show up. And now I get to travel the world and share my story with the world at conferences, with students, with other patients, to share hope of what the other side looks like with sickle cell disease. And no mom should have to get the devastating news that my mom received, that their child that barely made their entrance into the world is going to be taken out of this world. So I stand here today to work together with all of you and politicians, policymakers, other patients, to bring forth a world where every cure is possible, to where no one has to die because of their DNA and what they were born with, something that they had no choice in. And so I thank you guys for taking this time to listen to my patient journey. Thank you.
So Victoria, thank you so much for sharing your story. You know, it's needless to say that that the pre-CRISPR treatment journey was traumatic.
Yes.
But you share your story anyway so that we can learn from it, so that we can all improve patient care in whatever way that we're able to do that. So thank you.
Thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity.
No, absolutely. So I want to ask you about your faith in your community and how that played a role in you saying yes. And if you could please share the conversation that you had with your mother, because I think it's such a good example of faith meets science and the intersection of the two.
Yes. My faith played a very important role. I always knew that God was with me, even during the dark times. So I didn't try to commit suicide. I just prayed for God to bring me to Him. So when I shared with my mother that I was going to enroll in a clinical trial and I have to be in another state for 3 months, she was like, Vicki, God can heal you at home. And my thing that I shared with her, that Mom, I've been suffering. I know God can heal me. But each story in the Bible, every person had to do an action. The blind man had to go wash his eyes. The leopard man had to go wash in a pool. The woman with an issue of blood that I related closest to, she crawled through a crowd on her knees because no doctor had an answer for her. And she knew that even if she could just touch the hem of his garment, she could be made whole. And I told Mom, me making the sacrifices of leaving my kids, going to another state, losing my hair, was my journey, my faith walk to show God that I truly trusted him. I knew the science, but I trusted that God would see me through this process, and he removed my fear and placed the right people in my life and the right therapy to make my miracle possible. And now my mom's just like, I just can't believe it.
Yes. No, thank you for sharing. And so my next question is, you talked in your story about all of the things that you were able to do pain-free after the CRISPR gene editing treatment, but are there any new things that you've been able to do?
Yes, so just 2 weeks ago, I joined with Dr. Alan Anderson of Sickle Forward, and I hiked a few mountains in Colorado along with other warriors, Jimmy O'Leary, Tisha Samuels, Dick Chain, Dick had received BMT, Tisha received Lyfgenia, and Jimmy and I both were CRISPR recipients, and we hiked those mountains, reached summits, and faced everything that we had been told our whole life that we should avoid. I faced the cold, exertion, altitude, and I just left there with sore muscles and didn't have to go to the ER, didn't need Percocet or a fentanyl patch. And while doing that and healing my mind, I brought access to patients in Africa to receive newborn screenings, medications like penicillin and hydroxyurea, because most patients there die by the time they're 5 years old because they don't have access to a diagnosis or antibiotic.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I mean, that is amazing. Yes, please. And Jimmy O'Leary was actually here last year after he climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. So, I mean, just amazing, yes. Just absolutely amazing.
It's like a full circle moment. I was Jimmy's inspiration to move forward with CRISPR, and he was my inspiration, showing that I didn't have to live with the limits on my life, that I could hike this mountain and do well.
Yes, no, that's absolutely beautiful. So, can you talk a bit about, what you see for the future, or what you would like to see for the future of sickle cell disease?
I would love to see patients in Africa, India, and even the other 100,000 in the US have access to life-saving, life-transforming treatments like I had, because I always say that treatment didn't just free Victoria, it freed Jaden, Jadasia, Jamarius, Earl, and my mom and my dad, who my dad had the honor of being there with me during treatment. And after my treatment, he found out he had lung cancer, and he passed 2 years ago.
I'm sorry.
And I had the opportunity to share my journey and build connection with him before he passed away.
No, that's beautiful.
So my dream is so no other parent like my mom has to get a death sentence for their child. They just get to enjoy, just like baby KJ, his parents get to enjoy him and watch him grow and do activities. So that's my hope for the future.
No, thank you. And that's a beautiful hope for the future. And so just thinking about the future and, the treatment journey, or the journey that you went on prior to treatment, do you feel that it's changed much as an African-American woman, or, seeking treatment for sickle cell, just now that there's been so much, notoriety and exposure to sickle cell, specifically because of the gene editing and gene therapies that are available? You
would think that it has changed, but I still get news from patients, and have watched patients get kicked out of the emergency room because doctors don't believe them. One young lady in particular, you can see her get escorted out by security. They forced her to go home because they just don't believe her, and her trying to advocate for herself made her look like the angry black woman. But her mom the next day finds her at home dead. She lost her life that night after not being treated and not being believed. So it's still horror stories like this going on. It's still patients dying from sickle cell disease because we're not believed. So a lot has to change in order for these therapies to move forward, to build trust and faith in the community, and to bridge that gap.
Yeah, well, you are a huge part of that, and you being here today and talking to all of us is a huge part of that. So thank you again. And then, so my last question for you is, how would you like to be remembered?
I would like to be remembered for my heart, because I chose gene therapy not for myself, but for my children. I advocate not for myself, but for others. So I would love people to remember my heart, and me as a genuine person who loves and wants the best for all people.
Well, I can tell you that I remember you for your heart. So.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Rita.
And